Continuing our lecture from earlier, we're going to go ahead and talk about methods, string concatenation, conditional statements, and local variables. Earlier I said I would make this into a two-part lecture. I'm likely going to split this into a three-part lecture because the concepts are pretty difficult and I want to make sure that I spend the time on it. Methods, as I've talked about before, implement the behavior of the objects. In other words, the methods would do all of the work for a class. It's the only place where you have meaningful code. Everything else is a declaration, more or less. Methods have a consistent structure comprised of a header and a body. Just like a class has a definition at the top, then everything inside of it. Methods have a definition at the top and everything inside of it. They talk about two types of common methods here, accessor methods and mutator methods. Accessor methods provide data back to somebody that called them, and mutator methods change data. Some would argue that you could change and return values back. You're absolutely right. But for this conversation, they're classifying everything into two specific classes. Other sorts of methods can accomplish a variety of other tasks. So typically, what I do is the accessors are known as getters and the mutators are known as setters. That's the most common Java term that I'm familiar with. Accessor and mutator are equally right, but just understand that that's the intent. Typically, these methods are very short and can be auto-generated by some of the more advanced IDEs. As we talked about before, the method header, there's the definition public int get price. In this case, there's no parameters being passed in. It will return back an int back to the calling method. And this is accessible to anyone that's running the Java program. The header tells us exactly what I just said. Then the body encloses the method statements. So in other words, there's typically a curly brace or a start brace, and then you'll have the body. That's what this is referring to. Visibility modifier, repeating what I said. Return type method name, no parameters returned. And in this case, it's returning back price. This is a getter method. Which is also an access OR. And that's it. This is really simple. Accessor methods are typically really short like this. There's very seldom more in there. Sometimes there's one or two minor calculations, but it should not have a lot of code in it as a rule. Rules are meant to be broken. An accessor method always has a return type. That is not void. So by definition, if you're accessing data, it has to return something. Otherwise, you wouldn't be accessing the data. The value result of the given type in the header, this is nothing surprising. In other words, if you defined at the top an int, this is going to ensure that you return an int. It will contain a return statement, more of the same. Returning is not printing. So in other words, having a print statement inside the method is not returning a value to the calling method. The calling method will have to get something back by definition. Alright, so take a moment and look at this code. You might want to pause the video. There's multiple mistakes on this. Several will pop out. Several will be not quite as clear. A couple of them, as we go through, you'll say, oh, okay, yeah, sure. But anyway, take a moment, look at this, pause, and then unpause when you're ready. All right, there's 5 errors. Did you find 5? If not, pause it again. Go through here and see if you find all 5. Number 1. Semicolon here. Every programming statement must end with a semicolon. What I mean by programming is anything that causes an action or does an action. You're going to potentially, as we work through the language, debate on an if statement if that's the case. I'll explain more about the logic there. But anyway, there you go. There's 1. Number 2, did you catch the open-close parentheses? All definitions or all methods must have open-close parentheses. How about the end brace for this class? Did you catch it? All classes have to have a begin brace and an end brace. Now what's nice is BlueJ highlights in blue, I believe it's blue, the beginning and end braces. Either way, you'll see colors. And then when you click on this one, it'll highlight this one as a color, etc. Int for this private. So private int price. Did you catch that one? Then the final one, return capital P price. Capital P would have been the class if it existed. and there is no class named price, so that would have been a compiler error. It should have been a lowercase p. Java is case sensitive. Okay, mutator methods. These are methods that cause a change in the state of the class. What's state again? State is the variables and all their values brought together to define that class at that time, or that instance of the object in memory. Achieved through changing the value of one or more fields. We kind of talked about this. Often they receive parameters from a calling thing. They don't have to. You could have a method that opens a door and a method that closes a door. Set door open, set door closed. In that case, you wouldn't really have to have a value coming in or a parameter coming in if there was only one door in your system. If you have a house where there's multiple doors, then you probably have to pass in which door. All right. Visibility modifier public. Return type void. It's not returning anything back. You could debate on this. I like to return back a -1 for failed and a 0 for success. That's just me. Method name. Typical first character lowercase. Any words after that uppercase. And then the formal parameter, in this case, is passing in an integer amount. So then it's going to take the field that's being mutated, is going to equal whatever its current value is, plus the value that was just passed in. Then it's going to stuff it back in here. Balance would then be defined up here somewhere in the class. Fields often have dedicated set methods, which is true. So every set and get pair will exist for a field as a rule. There's always exceptions. These have simple distinctive form, void return type, method name related to the field name. So if I have a variable named price, there'd be a set price and a get price. Okay? And again, advanced IDEs will create all of this for you. Typical set method, mutator, set discount, int, and this comes in. We're going to go through something a little bit later where you'll do this differently, but for now, this is fair, but more advanced Java programmers do this differently. And then from here, you can infer that discount field is an int because of this, all right? And the private is typically assumed because you're creating these sets for all the privates. If it was public, there'd be no reason that you needed to. Protective mutators. A set method does not have to always assign unconditionally. A set method does not have to always assign unconditionally to the field. Interesting point. Let's keep going. The parameter may be checked for validity. In other words, you should always check to make sure that the data that you're sticking in to a variable is correct. So in this case, if it has to be greater than 0, you might check to see that it's greater than, equal to 0, greater than 0, less than 0, whatever. Mutators thereby protect fields, and they support the concept of encapsulation, which is a key Java concept. Continuing the discussion, subject void print ticket. So what this is doing is it's printing from within a method, system.out.println. Here's a bunch of good stuff. Update the total, and then clear the balance and move on. One of the things that I want you to know is that println statements in this level of Java are fine, but when you start to work on larger systems, they actually hurt performance because they stop everything else in this particular area when they're working. There's other ways like log4j to be able to handle that. I would strongly encourage you to look that up if you're going to be doing professional coding. String concatenation. 4 plus 5 equals 9. Nothing surprising there. When plus OW equals what? Because these aren't numbers, it can't really add the numbers together. So you end up getting window. Now Java does have some nuances that we'll talk about in a minute. If you've read through the book, you should already know that. Java is smart. If the line starts with a string, then it thinks everything's going to be a string. So result plus 6 says, I'm already a string, take the 6, stick it in there, so you'll get result 6. Starts with a string, number in the middle, therefore everything must be a string. Plus you can't add a string to a number. So number, price, cents, do it all together. 500 cents. Okay? Overloading is an example of this. Now, this is where I expect everybody to pause for a moment. Think about these values, pause the video, make sure that you're right, and then start the video. 5 plus 6 plus hello. So Java reads left to right. So it says a 5 and a 6 is 11. Uh-oh, I ran into a string. So what am I going to do? 5 plus 6 is 11, so it's going to do 11 hello. In this case, I started with a string, therefore everything must be a string. So what is it going to do? Hello plus a 5 plus a 6. Hello 56. Okay? So be aware of that. This is a gotcha. If you wanted this to evaluate differently, there are other ways. Think about it. I'm not going to give you the answer as to why, but there is a way around that. Think of order of operations. Method summary. Methods implement all object behavior. They do all the heavy lifting for a class. A method has a name and a return type. This is an interesting way of wording it. It is true. The return type can be void. A method might take parameters. I can call a method, but if I'm doing a get, why would I have to pass in parameters? Okay? Something to think about. And with that, I'm going to pause this video. Hopefully you've got something out of this lecture, and I'll see you in part 3.